The floor was cold under my knees when his little voice cut through the hallway. "That's my mommy," he shouted, pointing right at me. The man across the room dropped his coffee cup. It shattered. He wasn't supposed to remember me. Nobody was. My name is Bridget Coleman, and I'm 34 years old. 5 years ago, I worked as a nanny for one of the wealthiest families in the city. I fell in love with their son, and I got pregnant. I never wanted their money. I just wanted a family of my own. Something steady after a childhood that never gave me that. I grew up bouncing between relatives, learning early that love had conditions in some houses. I thought I'd finally found somewhere warm. I thought wrong. 9 months later, I was told my baby didn't survive. No funeral, no records, just silence and a check meant to buy my quiet. I signed nothing that day but grief. I wasn't rich or powerful, but I had something they thought they'd buried forever. The truth. So I took a housekeeping job under a different last name, just to stay close to a house that still owed me answers. If you've ever been dismissed because of your job title or your bank account, you already know how this feels.
You already know how this feels. People decide who you are before they even ask your name. Hit subscribe if you've been underestimated like that. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Click hype or like if this already feels personal to you. 5 years earlier, the family matriarch sat across from me in a private hospital room while I was still groggy from delivery. There were complications, she said, her voice flat, almost bored. The baby didn't make it. I remember the smell of antiseptic and cold coffee, the sound of a monitor beeping somewhere down the hall. I begged to see him. She refused. "Girls like you don't raise children like ours," she told me, sliding papers across the tray table. "Sign, and we'll take care of you." I was drugged, exhausted, and terrified, and I signed something, though I never fully understood what. Within days, I was packed into a car and driven away from the only home that had ever felt like mine. Now, standing in that same house 5 years later, I stared at a boy who looked exactly like the photos of his father as a child. My hands shook as I scrubbed the same marble floor I once walked as a nanny, now walking it again as a stranger in disguise. Then I saw it, a small birthmark on his wrist, shaped like a crescent moon, identical to mine. My knees went weak. They hadn't just lied about his death. They had raised him inside these very walls.
Feet from where they told me he never existed. The billionaire, his father, stood frozen for only a second before his face hardened. "Who put you up to this?" he snapped. "Are you trying to extort my family?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The staff around us exchanged looks, whispers already forming. Later that week, I heard 2 maids laughing in the kitchen. "That's the one who thinks she's someone's long-lost mother," one said, not caring if I heard. It stung, but I kept scrubbing, kept my head down, kept my mouth shut. Then the matriarch found me alone in the laundry room. Her perfume arrived before she did, sharp and expensive. "You will keep quiet," she said quietly, "or you will lose the only job you have left." I said nothing. I just nodded, the way I used to when I was too afraid to speak. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't that same broken girl anymore. I watched. I listened.
I remembered every date, every name, every detail I'd buried for years, and I started writing it all down again. What they didn't know was that I never actually signed everything they thought I did. That night in the hospital, still hazy but not completely gone, I had slipped my phone under the blanket and hit record before she ever sat down. I kept it, along with copies of discharge papers that never should have existed if my baby truly died. I had hidden it all in a shoebox under my bed for 5 years, too scared to use it, too broken to fight back. But watching that little boy run toward me, calling me the one word I thought I'd never hear again, changed something in me. I had a plan they never saw coming, and it had been waiting patiently this whole time. There was one person who might still remember the truth. The family's longtime attorney had handled my case back then,
And even years later, something about it had never sat right with him. He reached out to me quietly one evening, meeting me outside a small coffee shop instead of his office. "I kept a copy of the real birth records," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "I always knew something was wrong." His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, guilt written across his face. Meanwhile, the family grew careless, confident that a housekeeper posed no real threat. I overheard plans to quietly transfer me to another property far from the boy, erasing me from his life a second time.
The lawyer warned me they were moving fast, preparing new legal paperwork that could strip away any claim I had left. Tension pressed against my chest like a held breath. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The lawyer arranged everything to happen in their own living room, the same room where they once decided my fate without me. I walked in holding the folder, my hands steady this time. I laid out the hospital documents, the recording of the matriarch's voice admitting she lied, and DNA results confirming what I already knew. The room went silent except for the sound of paper hitting the coffee table. "You told me she was dead," the billionaire said, turning toward his mother, his voice shaking with disbelief. "You told me our son's mother didn't want him." She opened her mouth to explain, but nothing convincing came out. Her excuses crumbled in front of everyone, including the same staff who had mocked me weeks earlier. I watched years of practiced control disappear from her face. The boy ran across the room again, this time straight into my arms, and his father didn't stop him. He knelt beside us, tears in his eyes, finally seeing the truth he'd been denied for years. In the days that followed, I was given full custody rights and a formal apology from the father, who confronted his mother's years of manipulation head-on.
The family was left facing whispers and broken trust among themselves, the kind that doesn't heal quickly. I chose to stay in my son's life on my own terms, not as hired help, but as his mother, finally standing in the light instead of hiding in the shadows. They tried to erase me from his story. All they did was make sure I would never be silent again. If your motherhood or your truth was ever denied by someone with more power or money than you, I want to hear it. Tell me about a time someone tried to erase your story, thinking you'd never find out. Subscribe if you believe truth always finds its way back. Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when the people against you have more power than you do. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of this community. Let me know this story meant something by clicking hype. And tell me where you're watching from, because I love seeing how far these stories travel.